This podcast is brought to you by our willingness to appease our boredom by sharing, educating, and learning with our listeners.
Hey, we are the Pagan Pie Podcast, and I'm Susanna.
And I'm Tyler. Our goal is to talk about being pagan in the modern era and to help others on their journey.
In Season 1, our main focus is Northern European religions, including but not limited to Norse Paganism, Proto-Indo-European religion, Druidism, Wicca, and more.
Since this is our first episode, we're going to talk about who we are, the goals of this podcast, and an intro to paganism in general.
I've been a practicing pagan, I guess, out of the broom closet 8 years out in the open, but I got really experimental when I was a kid, and I grew up in the woods, and it just seemed appropriate. It just made sense to me. I'm also certified as a priestess. I don't identify with any particular religion. I do believe that it's more of a relationship with my deities. A lot of giving and taking, and that connection you have with your deities is really important, and it's more personal than like an organized religion.
100% agree.
Cool.
So my name's Tyler. I've been a practicing pagan for roughly 6.5, 7 years or so. As you said, out of the broom closet. I kind of started having my doubts as to what was when I was very, very young, and I had the very good fortune to have a parent that was very open to me experimenting with other spiritualities, and I think that helped to influence and make things much simpler for me to find my way. But yeah, I totally agree with you on it being a relationship thing, because each of the deities has their own specific personality, and while you may get along really well with one, you may not receive the same kindness per se or attention necessarily from another one. And I think that's an important thing that we all recognize.
Not to interrupt, but I think what you just said is really cool, because with paganism, it's generally polytheistic.
Right.
So I don't want to say 100% of the time, but I feel
generally speaking, yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like, it's not necessarily that it's like, oh, I don't agree with this deity, so I'm going to quit this whole religion. No,
right.
You have so many to choose from. And I think that's what's really cool.
Yeah. It's finding what really works best for you, and what relationship works best for you, who you can establish that connection with and foster that and make it grow.
What are you drinking?
Kraken and Coke.
Oh, I'm drinking wine. Cheers.
Cheers.
How did Tyler and Susanna meet? Once upon a time, there was this Facebook group, and it was a worldwide kind of thing. And then America decided they wanted their own group. And there started being posts like, hey, if you live in this state, comment where you live. Maybe we could all like try and meet up. We found out, oh my gosh, there's other heathens that live
nearby, literally a stone's throw away. So
yeah, in the Bible Belt. So that's pretty much how we met. So we decided that we wanted to form a kindred because we all got along really well. One thing that was cool, one of the first
things that we did,
was going to Oklahoma to
Heavener,
the Heavener runestone as a kindred. Yeah. And that was really cool because they had a fire pit the size of my living room and invited us to do a brotherhood ceremony celebrating togetherness and how cool it was to find
so many like-minded people
all in one spot. So many people back home, I find out, they believe in an older way of thinking, like a pre-Christian kind of way of thinking. And
right.
There's so many indigenous tribes in Alaska that they do take care of their land spirits and all this stuff. And I feel like I didn't really realize that until after I moved here. And then I was like, oh, I feel like I'm the only heathen in the land. And so it was really cool to connect with people through social media and then be able to have lasting good friendships out of it.
Right.
Thus birthed the podcast, the Pie.
Right. I've got some definitions and the etymology, and feel free to chime in because I think you're going to enjoy some of these. One of the first things is because there's a lot of people out there that just kind of throw different terms around, and you'll hear different phrases and things in popular media, TV shows. I had a few that I wanted to share with everybody. First one being pagan in general. The word pagan, the definition is a person holding religious beliefs other than those of the main world religions. So I'm sure everybody knows that Abrahamic religions are the ones that have kind of taken the foothold for more or less the last 2,000 years, whether most societies wanted them to or not. That's just the thing that happened.
We switched to a more masculine way of
yeah.
It wasn't a balance anymore.
The etymology, or where the word comes from, is it's actually Latin. And the root word was paganus, which simply meant a villager or rustic. So I guess, when you call somebody a pagan, you're just calling them a villager, just another one of the people type thing.
I'm sorry.
Right?
That's awesome.
Or, I don't know, is rustic a compliment? Man, you look very rustic today. I don't know if I should feel good about that. So that's kind of funny. And then moving into paganism, it's I thought it was interesting because the etymology and the definition of pagan versus paganism, the change in definition is very drastic. Paganism, specifically a non-Christian or pre-Christian religion. Simple as that.
I didn't actually know that about the etymology and the stuff behind it.
Yeah, so that's what I thought too. I was like, I've known these for a while, and I know a lot of people throw words around, but it is good to be educated about stuff, and that's what we're all about. The next word was heathen. Originally, this was used as an insult, but the definition, as far as what we have today, is a person who does not belong to the widely held religion as regarded by those who do. Basically, anybody that doesn't believe the way that you believe, you can call them a heathen. So it's purely like a spiritual insult is kind of what it sounds like.
I kind of like that though, because I call my pets heathens sometimes when they're acting like heathens.
Well, that's interesting too, isn't it? Because we've associated different behaviors and how we act with this word. But the etymology behind it is actually German, and it comes from a word with nearly the same pronunciation. I don't speak German, and it just means inhabiting open country. For me, in my head, until I really researched and dug up the terms, I always viewed words like peasant, like it's more insulting almost than heathen or pagan. But then after reading the definitions and where they came from, it's kind of almost the flip side. It should be like the word heathen should be more of an insult than being a peasant. But if you call someone a peasant, one, they'll look at you funny, like, did you really just use that word? But then like they can kind of get upset a little bit, right? I use that word a lot when I'm going to the market, like when I'm going to the grocery store, for those people that just walk around mouth agape, kind of like a turkey in a rainstorm. They're just staring at the ceiling and they have no idea what they're doing. I'm like, oh my God, you dirty peasant, get out of my way. Please go home. You are interrupting my shopping experience.
Single file line. Why does a whole family of really wide people all have to stand?
Right? Guys, like, just follow nature on this one. Do what ducks do and just one behind the next, please.
Be a duck.
That's right. Be a duck. I had two more definitions in etymology that I wanted to share. And this one, for everybody that's listening, was actually requested by Susanna, because we've heard this word a lot in a lot of media, like Sabrina the Teenage Witch. It's in the title. But the word witch, because there have been people that, she's met, that I've met, that we've met throughout the years that are pagan, but then when the term witch is thrown in, they'll get very upset. That's not me type thing. And then there's other people that will just outright claim it. I've even met groups of people, men, that claim to be witches, or that's the title that they claim for themselves. By definition, well, I'll let you guys make the decision. The definition of a witch is a woman thought to have magic powers, especially evil ones. Popularly, this is the definition, okay? This is where it gets fun. Popularly depicted wearing a pointy hat, a black cloak, and flying on a broomstick. So how 1800s is that definition?
It's very 1800s. I also just want to say, I think, minus the look they described in that definition, I feel like every woman has that power. But that's just me, because I think women are very magical. We cast spells on men, and that's why they like us.
That's right. Even through some of the crazy choices, we're still like, yeah, we'll, be here to support you.
We also cast spells on other women. My statement was a little too general.
So this is where it gets kind of interesting, because now we're going to get into the etymology of just the word witch. I'm going to get into witchcraft here in a minute, okay? Yeah, where it comes from. There's a few different things that I found, and it doesn't seem like anybody can really agree on where it actually came from. I found one that claims that it is Old English, and a lot of you guys, if you've done any reading on witches, witchcraft, that kind of thing, you'll recognize the term of Wicca, or I don't know how to pronounce the other one, but instead of W-I-C-C-A, that's a masculine term, which is interesting, right?
You said Wicca, like
Wicca.
W-I-C-C-A. That's a masculine term?
Wicca is the masculine term. W-I-C-C-E is the feminine term.
Wicca. Is that how you would pronounce it?
Wicca and Wicca.
So we're going to be clear real quick. We are not Wiccans, but
Nope.
since this is the Pie Podcast, our goal is to talk about a lot of different types of paganism to help educate ourselves and our listeners. That's why we're talking about Wicca.
Right. And this is not just for maybe you're on the fence of you're not sure what you believe, or you claim, I'm spiritual, but I'm still looking to find what fits me best. That's cool. You take all the time that you need. This is the pagan invasion of education. So, we're just trying to educate people. So next week, we may be talking about African paganism or Egyptian paganism. You never know.
I personally want to do more research on some of the Middle Eastern stuff. I love learning about Muslim culture and ideals and stuff. My mom grew up over in a Muslim country. I've always been interested in the culture she grew up in, because I think that's really
right.
cool. I love ancient history. Like, I love learning about the Babylonians and the Sumerians, and I think I can't wait to get into that. But that research, I feel like, is even harder, because you have to, we can't just ask one. That civilization doesn't exist anymore.
Right. Well, what's interesting, and before I get into the rest of the etymology there, is that in a lot of ways, there's a lot of different paganism cultures. Even take what we do with our focus on Norse pagans. A lot of what we do and what we know is been tainted or twisted to some certain degree. The vast majority of everything that we have has been recorded by a man that converted to Christianity before he wrote everything down. So finishing out the etymology for the word witch, just witch. Old English Wicca meant a female magician or sorceress, or a woman supposed to have dealings with the devil or evil spirits, and to be able, by their cooperation, to perform supernatural acts, which was interesting, right?
Again, all women. That also depends on your definition of the devil.
Or what you'd even consider to be evil spirits, because, realistically, anything outside of your spiritual beliefs could be technically considered an evil spirit, like a pagan god could be an evil spirit, if they are evil or not.
I have an interesting take on evil spirits. Just like human beings, my ex-boyfriend, he might think I am the worst human being in the world, right? To someone in my current life, they might think of me as like just a really good, awesome person, right?
So I'm gonna interrupt just for a half second, okay?
Yeah.
Because it ties into what we talked about at the very, very beginning. It's all based on that relationship that you have.
Yes. Additionally, just like every human being has the potential to be your worst nightmare or the angel, spirits have that same exact
absolutely
flexibility. Like, I don't necessarily believe in a divine good or divine evil. I think all of it has the potential to be either or.
Right. Well, it's an interesting thing, right? Almost every single belief in general has some kind of idea that in the beginning, there's nothing, right? And then you've got, or chaos, and then order comes in. There's no mention in that of good or evil. Right. And realistically, we can pick many different examples. I'm going to use one that everybody knows for a organized or orderly version of chaos and evil would be like the Nazis in Germany, right? That would be a very organized version of evil. And maybe a chaotic form of good would be like an uprising that frees a country, and that for the betterment of the people. Like there's different levels that we can get into and touch on.
Super simple layman's terms, I guess. Sometimes good concepts aren't positive.
Right.
And sometimes bad concepts aren't negative.
Right. Yeah. There's no black and white. Life's more interesting than that. To tie in here's etymology, the Old English, Wicca. There's also another Old English definition, which I thought was hilarious, and I think you guys will really enjoy, because it's a word most of us use probably once a month, or maybe less. More, I think, if you're a parent.
Oh, I'm
But
excited.
the translation is divination, and the word is wiggle. Exactly, right? That was my response. W-I-G-L-E, wiggle. And
Wiggle.
it's divination, right? And then I found a Proto-Germanic etymology, W-I-K-K-J-A-Z. Wikiaz, I guess. Its loose translation would be necromancer.
I love that.
And then diving in to wrap up, the definition for the word witchcraft is almost exactly what you're going to think it is: the practice of magic, especially black magic, i.e. the use of spells.
Witchcraft, I feel like any person who is practicing magic, and some people take shamanism, for example. Shamanism is very connected to the earth, and so is witchcraft, but witchcraft is more, I feel like some people more associate that with evil spirits. Shamanism is more earth spirits. And I think, to me, I've never identified as a witch, but I do not correct people if they call me one. That's a term for them, not for me. That's a term for them to understand me better.
Well, it's much the same way in like science. When people try to label something that they've never seen before, they just call it by something that is remotely similar to. So that was kind of what I wanted to cover, at least for this week, for the educational side of things, was the definitions. And I may chime in with more of those week to week, not only to educate everybody else, but to add more to my knowledge base too.
Yeah, and I think expanding your vocabulary doesn't necessarily have to mean learning a new word at face value, like actually learning in detail what it means. It's almost like getting to know a person, except it's a word, you know?
Yeah. So there's a book I'd like to recommend for anybody that's listening to this. And I understand that if you're listening to a bunch of podcasts, it's probably because you don't have time to read a book. At least that's what I found for me, because I have an hour drive to work and then an hour drive home. So I can't read and drive at the same time. But there's a book that both Susanna and I have in our personal libraries that's called Norse Shamanism. I thought was a very interesting read.
Oh, I love it.
And they actually have like a lot of rituals and things like that. So anybody that's interested in that branch of paganism, I would very much advise you guys to read that book.
It's really, I mean, I like it because
Very
like
in-depth.
they go into a lot of science, which
Yeah.
I think is awesome, because that's another reason why Tyler and I connect so well, because we prefer our spiritual experiences to have some sort of scientific
foundation
relationship.
Yeah. So
there's that, and that was something I really appreciated about the book. But there's exercises to get better at recognizing certain aspects of your deity and yourself. Our next subject is an introduction to the Elder Futhark runes, which I think are important in Norse paganism because they didn't necessarily have a written language, but they had these runes that symbolized things. It's important to not only be able to recognize them, but learn how to work with them if you are interested in Norse paganism. The information that we want to give you guys serve as an intro to these runic lessons that we plan on being kind of interactive to just teach you different ways you can utilize these things. These lessons are not planned to be like a teacher-student, I'm right, you're wrong. I want people to
think
figure it out. Yeah, think.
Yeah, it's not going to be like elementary through high school where it's like this is the right answer. This is what you do. It's going to be more like college where they ask you what you think and then you talk about it from there.
Exactly. In life, there are no absolutes, and we all have different perspectives that are valid and that can be helpful in our growth together. I'm not saying that there are no wrong answers. Obviously, there are some things that are just so far off the cuff that it might just belong to a different room. That should go without saying. If it just doesn't have anything to do with it, probably belongs to a
Right.
different room. There will be several different sections for each rune. We're going to talk about the physical and spiritual realm meanings, mythological meanings, modern day and practical usage, qualities in nature, corresponding deities, and the Galder. For those of you that don't know, Galder is a Norse pagan word that means spell songs. So this way you would say a rune during ritual, whether you're solo or in a group. The Elder Futhark is the oldest Proto-Norse Germanic alphabet from the 2nd through 8th centuries. There's 24 runes total, and we're going to talk about them throughout the next several weeks.
Touching on that, there's two things I'd like to bring up now, and then we can elaborate further in the coming weeks when we get into runes and bind runes and things of that nature. Runic magic is one of those things. It's exactly that. It's a form of magic. I think there's too many people out there that view it as a very strict and like it's black or white. And much with everything else, I think it's not quite that simple. Because I've been told by a few people in the past that certain runes are cursed. And I'm like, it doesn't make any sense to me. So my best way to describe my thought on runic magic is it's much the same way that, let's use a hammer just for Thor's sake, shall we? We'll use a hammer as an example. I can tell you that a hammer is strictly only to be used for building things, for hitting nails. That is it. And that is all that it can ever possibly be used for. And then somebody else can turn around, take that same hammer and use it to take down a wall or cause injury to another person. And that suddenly changes it from a tool for building and creating things to being a destructive weapon. It's not a cursed thing. It's in how you use it. And I think that's an important distinction that people need to know.
Completely agree with that sentiment. And I think that might be another reason why we get along so well, because both of us agree that there are positive and negative qualities for just about everything.
Everything, period. It's all in how you use something that determines whether it's used for a creative or a destructive purpose. But I think that right there is a part that gets a lot of people confused, or maybe they misinterpret things. Bind runes are when you combine multiple different runes for a stronger purpose.
Say a bind rune that you make. It has your intention and your perspective and
Right.
your rune. These are your choice. Like there are some runes that they kind of have similar meanings.
Right. They work well.
On top of that, say if you give it to me and I see it differently.
Right.
What I'm getting at is you can make a bind rune and I can receive it and it'll mean something different to me. It might not be completely different. It's a similar thing with like tarot cards.
I have an interesting story on a tarot card that a friend of mine, and we were talking about it because she's very into tarot. We were sitting there and like, I think it's great. It's not a tool that I understand how to use very well, but she was talking about the courage card and how she wanted to get it tattooed because she thought it was amazing. She goes, it shows the strength of a woman who's, holding open the mouth of a lion, and it just shows women's strength overall in general. I said, well, that's one way to look at it. You can look at it as a force of physical strength. Now let's flip the coin and look at it as a show of emotional and mental restraint. That lion, there is absolutely no way that woman could hold that lion's mouth open. And he is showing extreme strength and resilience of character not to just rip her to pieces.
I fucking love that.
Yeah, they went, well, I hadn't thought about it that way. So, well, everything's not quite so black and white. So,
yeah, exactly. There isn't a wrong answer or a right answer.
Right.
We're just here to talk about our different perspectives and how we can help other people. Because back when I used to do the Wisdom Wednesdays, the thing that I have learned about the Norse filter is that the gods don't help you because you ask for it. They help you because you deserve it.
Right.
So if you work hard, you get better benefit.
You and I had an interesting conversation about that a few years ago, how you saw a bunch of these posts where people are like, oh, this thing happened in my life. Loki's in there fucking stuff up. And you're like, who are you to deserve Loki's attention?
That is something I totally say. I'm like, who the hell are you that Loki's going to give a crap about you? Quit blaming it on Loki, which ironically, I'm wearing a Loki shirt today. I didn't mean to.
Like, locked my keys in my car. Damn that Loki. And I'm like, what the fuck? Every little thing. Yeah.
You don't deserve his attention. Quit
That's right.
blaming your shit. So here's the deal. I'm not trying to talk any garbage on people. Abrahamic religions do the same thing with the devil. They blame so much on the devil. And I'm like, he ain't got time for you. He's writing blues at the crossroads.
It's time for questions and answers. These are past questions that we've been asked, and it really made us think, and we'd like to present that information to you.
Question number 1. Do you have any tips for beginners to paganism or to Norse paganism? Tyler, do you have any?
I think the biggest thing that you can do, because it is very difficult. I mean, we went years without knowing that there was another pagan nearby. Social media is a wonderful tool to reach out, find other like-minded people, but know that like-minded does not mean hive mind. Don't get lost in the overall. If you're going to get lost in something, get lost in your own thoughts. I think it's important to be a sponge and take in as much and research as much as you can. But that's my 2 cents. Take it, leave it, spend it how you will.
As far as tips for beginners goes, I really think research and meditation are the most important things, because you can cross-reference your research with archaeological things, or if, read books or podcasts, anything that just helps you think bigger than just what's in front of you. Because sometimes these things are not in front of you. They require like a lot of soul digging.
I think when you get too focused on the just the general thing of all of it, and you take things for face value, that's where the brosa true kind of comes.
Brosa true. I love that you mentioned that. I feel like that's part of a negative push.
Because we started off being super, I'd say relatively neutral in pagan terms and everything like that. But for those that are listening, I hope that you guys will understand that the things that we're talking about, you can take and you can apply to whatever area of paganism that you are interested in, whether it's for your own personal spiritual side of things or you're just looking at more educational things. So any of the answers that we give, we try to round it out to make it fit in with whatever niche you're in.
I agree with that sentiment. I think I already said it, but just in case, I'll say meditation. I think agreeing with Tyler, getting lost in your own thoughts and not getting lost in them per se, but developing a relationship with your higher self and really feeling out your own reasons for doing things. Like that'll help you connect to your deity, that'll help you connect to your runes, that'll help you connect to whatever your tool is. Runes are a tool, deities are deities. Every form of paganism has tools and deities. But actually, I think that's every religion.
Yeah.
So for Abrahamic religions, they might have
Bible, Quran, or
all of these things. With paganism, it's a bunch of random stuff. A freaking leaf, a deer antler, anything that holds sentiment to you. Another good tip for beginners, and it's something that I have done, I took 3.5 by 5 inch note cards and I drew all the runes out. And I display them like up in a thing. So I'll do a rune in a day. I say that, but it's been like a month and a half since I last changed it. So I do a rune of the season or whatever I'm feeling. And then I'll research it and like dive deep and learn more about it. Because I think the thing that separates this type of paganism from other things, and a big tip for beginners, is never stop researching, because there is no guru. There is no one that knows everything. There's always something to learn. And it's valuable to learn something for yourself rather than having a guru or a pastor tell you what to think and believe.
I think that's well said.
Question number 2. How do you practice by yourself?
Well, for me, my main focus is, like you said before, the runes are a tool. I try to spend a little bit of time preparing myself, I guess. Like I'll wash my face and just try to clear my mind a little bit. But then I've got all of my runes in a little bag, and I just kind of close my eyes and let my fingers drift through the stones. And when I feel connected to that stone, I draw that stone, look at it, and really think about the meaning behind it, and just meditate on that stone for that day, and think about how not just what it is and what that sigil represents, but how those qualities are at work in my life. Because I think that for me is the way that this is kind of like my higher self is guiding my hand to show me this is what you need to focus on. So it's a way of clearing out all the muck and saying, okay, I need to focus on these things today or this week or whatever I'm feeling. And at the end, I focus a little bit on my patrons and sit in meditation and thinking and, trying to have at least some thought going to them so that I can still keep that relationship up.
I think that's really cool. But the 9 noble virtues, they are not a thing in Proto-Indo-European religion.
Right. It's 1970s, I think, is actually when it showed up.
Yeah. So it is inspired by, though.
Right.
And those things, I actually really identify and really agree with them. Another way I like to practice is trying to find something. I try to find a way I can give back to the earth in some way every week. And I'm not really good at doing it every day, giving back to the land, because to me, the land spirits are at the same level of importance as deities.
Right.
So that's how I practice.
Oh, that's cool.
Okay. Do you have any advice for newcomers for overcoming the negative push?
Okay, so for those that know me, I don't care when it comes to people like and their response to how I think or anything. Like, obviously I care about how people feel and their opinions and stuff. I'm very empathetic, but when it comes to the things that I think or the way that I feel, if somebody's trying to cut it down and I know that they are, I take in my head the stance of, well, who are you and why should I care? So kind of the same thing we were talking about, the guy with Loki's, what have you done to draw my attention?
You deserve my attention.
Why do you deserve my attention? And if I can't find a, like, if it's a parent, then like my mom, then, I'll listen to what she has to say and we'll have a conversation rather than an argument. But if it's one of my friends or a random person I just met, say the Jehovah's Witness knock on your door or something like that, and then, they try to sit there and, well, aren't you afraid your soul's going to burn in hell? Well, no.
Well, and that's also going back to perspective and gray areas. Like, do you believe that place exists, for one? For two, if it did exist in my realm or in my world or in my worldview or whatever.
Right.
Is it really that bad of a place? I don't know.
Right. That's my way of dealing with it. If it's somebody that I care about, we'll have a conversation as opposed to an argument. And I like to point out, because there are a lot of people nowadays with social media, I think has broadened people's courage a bit, where people will just sit there and they'll start yelling and screaming. I want to remind everybody that a conversation and an argument are different. A conversation, or a debate rather, if two people are having a conversation and they're both willing to change their perspective based on facts that are presented. An argument's just two people trying to see who's louder.
think it's really interesting because like and you can disagree with someone or not like someone
Yeah.
without having to be blatantly rude or mean or argumentative.
Yeah. Exactly.
Like, I don't think
So.
it has to be a fucking fight all the time.
Right. Exactly. No, I don't have time for that. So.
Yeah.
But that's it. Like, if it's somebody that I care about, I'll listen to what they have to say and we'll have a conversation. If it's a random person, then I take the stance of, who are you and why do I care? You've done nothing to deserve my attention. So, and that's kind of the end of it. So, yeah.
Also, I feel like if it is someone you care about, just be respectful and ask questions.
Mm-hmm.
Figure out why they're upset with you or figure out why they have a negative view.
Especially when it comes to your spirituality. Remember, it's a relationship between you and your spirit, deity, whatever, not them and your spirit or deity or whatever you choose.
Abso-fucking-lutely. I mean, I don't know what else to say about that one. That's all I got. The negative push, don't care, be respectful if it's someone you care about, and ask questions to understand their side rather than just being defensive.
Knowledge is power in the end, and that's, so.
I think that's awesome. I think that was a good one. I just want to say this is our first episode, so we're still working the kinks out. I'm not apologizing because I'm not sorry. But anything else, Tyler?
I think that's it. Just want to mirror what you said, and thanks everybody for listening, and we'll catch you next week.
Thank you for listening today. Be sure to follow the Pagan Invasion for Education on Facebook or on Instagram at Pagan Pie Podcast. Tune in next time to hear about the Scandinavian folktale troll ride and our reactions to it.